Whoop, did Matthew just fall out?
Yeah, he's going to join us on Google Chrome. All right, we are broadcasting now. So I'm going to give Matthew a second to come back to us on Google Chrome.
Have you guys been able to open the Q&A app?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm having trouble with it, but...
It just says questions. There aren't any posted right now.
Okay.
Do you not see it?
I think it's coming up now. It's just taking a long time. I see, yeah.
We're asking Google to do an awful lot.
How do I submit a question?
Oh, hello, Chris.
Hello.
Hello, Chris.
Hey, it's Stevie. And it's Scott. Hi, guys.
Hey.
And there's Liz. Why did Liz show up? Because does your video show up when you chew? Hi, Bronwyn.
Hey.
Question to answer.
Yeah,
Hello, Chris.
Show up and start making noise.
Hello, Chris. This is Nick.
Presenters are.
Nick. Nicholas. That's Nicholas?
Yes. Nice to meet you virtually, Chris.
Nice to meet you. So you are the New York area waste person? Is that who you are?
I love the title. Absolutely.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Hi there. I'm Justin.
Hi, Justin.
And we just got a question from Jeff Warren about who is visible, and the answer is presenters. We can take up to 10 on Google Hangouts, and so there are presenters on here, a couple extra seats, and then if you don't get on this initial group of people, you can submit questions to us on the Q&A tab. And then we can actually see what they are. So I just got another question right now from Patrick Coyle that says, I see, so I hear the number of folks. Am I visible? Nope, Patrick, I can't see you because you're just watching. But if you click that link on there, we can take a couple more people on this panel. And you can see us. Great. Now, can everybody else see the Q&A?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
I don't think I found the Q&A.
Tomorrow.
Hey, Matt's back.
We're going to have to set aside, like, a chunk. Like a chunk. Probably not tomorrow, which is going to be a fun day.
All right. So we have Matthew back. And I think that somebody is playing the Google Hangout as we're presenting. So if you're actually in this, go ahead and pause the Google Hangout online.
In between, and I can just maybe put some more hours in next week. This week. Okay. That way.
Matthew, do you have background noise?
Yeah, I think I'm talking to the background noise right now to reduce it. Hopefully we will.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So thanks everybody who's here. I'm really excited to have you all. And I'm just going to let you know, if you didn't hear what I said the first time, we can take up to 10 people on the Google Hangout, and then everybody else can watch and submit questions and comments through the Q&A tab. Playing the Google Hangout as we're presenting. So if you're actually in this, go ahead and pause the Google Hangout.
People can mute, maybe. We're getting some echo.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. If all goes well, and so far we have everybody on, which is great. We're going to have a few presenters today, and we're going to start out with Matthew Lippincott, who's going to present to us a little bit about aerial photography and map knitting. And Justin Manley's going to follow up with updates on what's new and coming to mapknitter.org through his work and some other students' work on Google Summer of Code. Scott Eustace, who's sitting right here with me, is going to talk to us a little bit about one of his projects that we've been running here on the Gulf Coast to do mapping of Barataria Bay. And then Nicholas Johnson and Bronwyn are going to talk to us a little bit about some New York projects that are really awesome on Fresh Kills Park and Deadhorse Bay, all mapping in New York City. So thanks everybody for coming and joining us here on Google Hangout, and for the first open hour, it's really exciting to host in this capacity, and we're looking forward to a really good presentation. All right, Matthew, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Sure. So I thought I'd start with an overview of kite and balloon aerial mapping from the Grassroots Mapping Volunteer Project to Public Lab as our nonprofit as it stands. So everything started around the Gulf oil spill, and these are images from the Bucket Brigade, where one of our co-founders, Shannon Dos-Megan, worked, and community monitoring and mapping of the existing oil infrastructure around the Gulf Coast area. So these were very traditional citizen science efforts with low-cost tools. And of course, the Gulf oil spill happened, and existing networks were mobilized to try to map it. And they were starting off using things like Ushahidi, but Jeff Warren's thesis project, which was grassroots mapping, which he started as a mailing list, which myself and Stuart, who's in this picture, was on, decided to go down to the Gulf and start doing balloon and kite mapping. So long story short, got lots of maps with a very simple system of flying cameras in soda bottle crash cages of kites and balloons. So we started it with kind of these early DIY kits, lots of string, weather balloons, kites, and we've slowly refined that as we got imagery. The imagery we got was really great. This is it versus the official IRMA SCAT database, and you can see some discrepancies there. So like red is supposed to be really heavy oiling, green is supposed to be really light oiling. You know, here in this image, it seems like the green and red sections are similarly oiled. And this trend continues through a lot of imagery that we've collected. So the imagery that was collected by the Grassroots Mapping volunteer effort, and Scott will speak to updated versions of this information, was really useful in terms of providing a different record and telling a more complicated story than the official data. So like this is a resolution of satellite imagery from the same day, and you know this was the stuff that we collected. So low altitude aerial photography is a very powerful communicative tool, and we have a whole archive of maps we've put together, 315 as of today, and counting all over the world. And you know, when we started making these maps, we used a combination of Photoshop and GDAL, which, as you can see, is extremely easy to use and accessible. I mean, it's a total mess. And so Jeff Warren, who's one of our programmers, he came up with MapKnitter, which is a really brilliantly easy and simple way to make map imagery. So you take existing photographs and drop them over satellite images, and by pulling and stretching the corners, produce what's called an orthorectified map, which means images that are normalized to geographic coordinates. And so this system is part of the basis of our kind of more professionalized move beyond the grassroots mapping volunteer initiatives. So now we have a nonprofit supporting this, and we've been developing MapKnitter. Justin will talk about some current developments going forward. One of the cool things about MapKnitter is we have the most transparent aerial imaging workflow out there. So if you find one of our maps, you can find all of the original images, who took the images, who manipulated the images, what manipulations were made to them to make them a map. You can print a copy of the map, download all of it, And this gives us the ability to kind of mainstream true accountability in aerial imagery. You can find our imagery in Google Maps. It'll say it's from public laboratory. You can then go back to MapKnitter and see those original images. And there's no other aerial imaging provider which has that level of transparency. So that's the kind of the tool work chain and the flow we try to replicate with other tools too. Right, we formed a nonprofit to engage researchers, as community researchers, not as subjects. And people tried all sorts of different mapping tricks. Like these are garbage bags, party balloons. These are solar hot air balloons, mylar balloons. I make a lot. I've been really into making DIY kites out of things like Tyvek. This is a $5 kite of mine. But after all of these DIY kits, we found out people like buying things, and people kept asking us for kits. So we now sell balloon and kite mapping kits. So we have a kind of standardized hardware, and most people seem to be pretty comfortable with this stuff. We have a variety of developments, though. So we use these simple soda bottle rigs, and there are instructions on how to build this on our site. You can also do more complicated things, like here's a 3D printed rig that Sassy has made. And these kits let you do fun things. So like just last weekend, I was flying off wind. So you can see I have an asymmetrical tail on one of my kites. And yeah, so things are still in development. And that's kind of the really quick workflow of how we got to where we are. And I'm going to pass it to Justin, who's going to talk about future developments, I believe. Right?
Yep.
Great. Thank you, Matthew.
So let me get the screen share up. Hey everyone. Can you see the map that I'm showing right now?
Yes.
Great. So I'm working on Google Summer of Code this summer with Public Lab, and I'm working on some MapKnitter enhancements. So I'll go through those a little bit. So here's a map that I pulled this morning from MapKnitter's, like the front page of MapKnitter. And Matthew showed some images like this, and they're really great, but in isolation like this, it can be hard to tell what's going on and what the purpose is. And so to add some more information to the maps that are hosted online on MapKnitter so that a year later or 2 years later, people can look back and have an idea of why the maps were created, maybe what the features are that are important. So like where there are chemicals that have been found, where there's a factory or an area of interest. And so our kind of inspiration is maps that people have created online in the public lab community, and really done a lot in PowerPoint and Photoshop to annotate them themselves. So stuff like this, where there are a lot of text annotations and arrows calling out important features. And so the things that I'm trying to add are basically some basic text annotation. So like text that can go right on the map, can be rotated, can be the color can change, the size can change. Also things like arrows and pointers, and potentially even more rich media annotations. So things like video or images that you would want to attach to points on the map. So making some progress right now, working specifically on text annotation. So doing stuff like this. You can see over here, this is just the basic leaflet drawing plugin. And so right over here on the left side of the screen is the leaflet drawing toolbar. And I'm just adding at this point a little text annotation feature. You can see how it might behave in zooming, so some kind of technical details. The the overall goal for this project is to enable text annotation and other kinds of annotations on the map, but also to encourage annotations and map descriptions that will help people understand the purpose of the maps. And so that will hopefully include providing easier integration between MapKnitter and public lab research notes, as well as some kind of toolbar or sidebar to really encourage users to submit detailed descriptions of maps. So that's my project. There are a couple of other folks working on Google Summer of Code with MapKnitter this summer. I'm doing annotations. Vidun is working on MapKnitter image auto placement. So images have many images have geographic data embedded in it already, and so Vidun's working on placing those images automatically based on embedded geographic data. And Anish is rewriting the rubber sheeting code from MapKnitter in Leaflet. So there are going to be some pretty cool improvements coming to MapKnitter soon, by August or September. So keep an eye out for those. That's it.
Great. Thank you, Justin. That was awesome. So up next, I'm actually going to screen share here, and I'm sitting next to and my computer's slow. Hold on just 1 second.
And I think we wanted to just give a little bit, go in more depth about aerial photography in wetlands. You know, a number of images have been shown in the last 2 presentations. Talk a little bit about just the logistics of such an effort because we've embarked upon kind of a systematic, well, a little bit of a systematic survey of these marshes. I believe all the images that have been shown so far are in a place called Barataria Bay, and on the northern rim of Barataria Bay. It was a place that, you know, Louisiana has a pretty fractal coastline. It was a place that had a lot of BP's oiling very far in. And it was, the places that have been shown are places that have been oiled considerably.
I'm having trouble screen sharing.
I'm running out of things. Okay. We have the pictures. I think the idea behind the 2013-2014 work was to change up the workflow, just because kind of the economy of attention and the social dynamics around the BP oil disaster have certainly changed a lot. And also to have comparisons of maybe some places that weren't oiled so much to see how those places are changing. So we have an array of 20 sites which were initially selected by Dr. Alex Kolker, whose lab was an important ally for you know, providing the boats and that kind of logistical support for a lot of the aerial photography that was taken in 2010 when the oil was still coming in, and 2011, which we were still in the middle of responding, and there's still different types of cleanup activities still very active in northern Barataria Bay. In 2014, there's the ongoing studies of what's called the NRDA, the Natural Resources Damage Assessment. But there's no longer a response. yeah.
It's okay. Why don't we switch up the order just a little bit, and I'm going to try to work on getting my screen share fixed. Would Bronwyn or Nick, would either one of you mind going for a second while I try to figure this out? I think you're both muted. Or okay, Nicholas, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'm happy to go ahead, if that's okay, Bronwyn.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. Let me go ahead and get my screen share going here. Oh boy.
Oh, yours is working.
Oh dear. Goodbye.
Okay. Wait. Did that work? Can you see a map now?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Hello, everyone. My name's Nick. I am based in New York here. My involvement in public lab really comes from my passion and maybe / obsession with trash. And that obsession with trash led me to do a lot of research here in New York about how New York really handles its waste, what happens to it. And in pursuing that question, what happens to waste, I discovered Fresh Kills landfill. And Fresh Kills is, when it was in operation, it was the largest landfill on the planet. It was 3 times the size of Central Park. It was visible from space. It was this amazing and epic area. And you can actually see, I've highlighted the area here in yellow. This was, it's in Staten Island, one of the 5 boroughs in New York. And it was this epic place. And I became really curious about this. And around the same time, I was introduced to Public Lab, and I thought it would be a really interesting exploration to do balloon mapping in this location. Just to give a little background, this is Fresh Kills in its heyday in the 50s and 60s, where literally it was just trash piled on top of dirt and dirt piled on top of trash and seagulls everywhere. And then they actually closed it down in 2001, and they're in the process of turning it into a public park. So this is a view of the landfill today. The 2 towers there are methane flares, so there's actually a methane collection process that happens in the landfill. So when I actually went out there, I kind of randomly made some phone calls and got in touch with some people at the Parks Department who was responsible for this, and went out to kind of do and this was actually my first balloon mapping experience. And I went out there and discovered that balloon mapping is not as easy as just putting a camera on a balloon and sending it up in the air. Where actually, this image was probably the better of the images that I took that day on that first expedition. And you can see, using the plastic bottle camera technique, the camera shifted in the container, and it started all of my photos incorporated a bit of that plastic container, which was a bit frustrating. But even though that was happening, I was still able to pull out some interesting questions that came out of this. And I think here, looking at this image, you can see the gray here this is a road, actually. And everything to the right is not the landfill, but everything to the left is the landfill. And immediately you can see the difference in terrain. You can see it's somewhat grassy here and absolutely not grassy here at all. Beyond that, you can then start to see that there are these white holes here, and these are actually the landfill collection system. So when they cap the landfill, they actually put in these collection tubes, and this is where they actually collect the methane. So I thought that was kind of also very interesting to see this from above. And then, of course, in this image, you notice right away that there's this very odd-colored, bright red that stands out of all of this. And I was a bit shocked when I saw this at first. I'm like, what on earth is oozing out of this landfill? It looks hideous. But on research and actually talking to the Parks Department, the terrain, the dirt that's actually covering the landfill is imported. It's very rich in nitrogen. It's actually the nitrogen runoff that changes the color into this really rusty type color. So it's actually a sign of very fertile land that's on top of the landfill. I found it to be very interesting. So this was my first experience of going out to Fresh Kills and trying to do balloon photography. And I managed to actually coordinate another group to go out there and do other photographs, and they were a bit more successful. I was actually able to see the landfill, and I have some of these better, more clear resolution. Now, the landfill itself has other challenges. First of all, it's within 3 miles of an airport, of Newark Airport, so the maximum height that I could do a balloon is 500 feet, which is a challenge, especially when the landfill is as vast and as grand as it is. So actually covering the entire landfill is almost an impossibility. After that second expedition, we were able to create this map, and you can see kind of the outline with the road here of where the landfill is, all the images that we took, and you can see that we barely covered this mound, and this section here is really one mound out of 5. So to give you a sense of how big everything is, an afternoon of balloon mapping resulted in this, which is still really huge landfill. So after going through this, I was really just exploring, the landfill in a sense, and really building up this relationship with the Parks Department. But I really didn't have a question, a scientific research question as why this is useful. Like, what is the purpose of actually going out there and taking these images? After discussing this with some people at the Parks Department and showing them the images and talking about it and looking at the map, they realized that one of the things that's happening at the park is they have an invasive plant species called Phragmites. And this Phragmites is pretty common on the eastern coast, and you wouldn't think of an invasive plant species as really that big of a deal for a landfill, when in fact here it is. And I have an image here of the Phragmites, and the reason why it's so interesting is you can see the blacktop, the road there, and you can see the Phragmites penetrating right through that blacktop. It's very invasive. And really what that means is for the landfill itself, after a landfill is closed and capped, there's actually a plastic liner that is meant to really entomb the entire landfill, meant to keep everything out and everything in of the landfill. Looking at this Phragmites, this is it has a lot of potential to actually disrupt that membrane which seals in the landfill. So if this, imagine it's penetrating through the road here, it could very easily penetrate through some type of membrane. So trying to understand, well, where exactly is Phragmites taking place in the park then became a real scientific question, one that could be potentially solved or at least highlighted by looking at aerial photography. So if I go back to a couple of these images I took previously, immediately you can start to see the variations in coloring. And this is our first kind of clue or idea that, well, maybe we can identify Phragmites from the air with these photographs. So you can see this really dark section of green here versus the bright green areas. Then there's more of the dull green, and then another shade of green here. So right now I'm actually in the process of working with the Parks Department to schedule other expeditions of going out to the park. It's not actually public, so it is a closed park right now, so we have to have permission to go out there. But so what we're doing now is scheduling a trip out there within a couple weeks to see if we can actually identify Phragmites, and then develop a larger project of actually mapping where Phragmites exists in the landfill. So this was, it's been an ongoing process, but it's been a very exciting and interesting process to see how just starting to take these photographs from the balloon photography actually leads to a research question and something that is actually very important to the landfill. So that's a project that's ongoing, and for all of you in the area, keep an eye open on the lists. I'm going to be requesting or asking for some help in the weeks to come, and certainly in September, the Fresh Kills Park, they do a sneak peek every year, which is an opportunity for the public to visit the park, where it is actually open to the public, and we'll be flying multiple balloons is the hope. We'll actually be trying to organize people to map, if not the entire park, a greater portion of the park there. So that's one research project that I'm working on here in New York, and I hope that some of you can help participate in the future.
Great. Wow, thank you so much. That was awesome. Wish I was going to be in New York and could help out with that. That looks like a lot of fun. I think we fixed our screen share here, but Bronwyn, do you want to go, or do you want us to go here? I think you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Either way.
Oh, there we go.
Quick.
Go for it.
Okay. All right. All right, so I've just started going out into Deadhorse Bay to kind of take a look around, hopefully get some good aerial maps of the trash that's around there. And so just a little bit of background. Deadhorse Bay is, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but you know, right sort of towards the bottom middle of this picture.
Rob, I think your screen share is up. Did you click your screen share?
Yes. Can you not see?
Nope, we see you.
Oh, okay, hold on.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, you look fabulous.
Yeah, okay, hold on. Okay, here we go.
Ah, there it is.
Are you looking at it now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, yeah. So Deadhorse Bay is in South Brooklyn. It used to be. This is a map from 1898 when it was all barren island. That island ended up being sort of filled in with landfill and sand from Jamaica Bay to connect it with Brooklyn and to put an airfield on one side. So where you see the words Deadhorse Bay, that part is actually mostly the seaside part of that is now underwater, and yeah, so there are zones of trash. It's sort of the kind of beach you can walk it, you know, slowly in about half hour, 40 minutes. And so it's just sort of a washing garbage. There are kind of areas where, you know, the light stuff will go up towards, you know, inland, and then the heavier stuff is just sort of accumulating sort of down in the surf. I've noticed over the last couple of years of just kind of going and walking around, there are some big items like trees and boats that are kind of there on the beach, and they all kind of seem to be migrating northward over the years a bit, although you know, new things kind of show up, even though there's plenty of old stuff there too. So this is what it looks like now. This is the Google Map picture. There, if you can see, there's a sort of a pointer to where there's a spit that shows up on all of the maps, but I've never ever seen it above the water level. You can see there's a path that sort of forks off in 3 directions. Really, the only the very top fork of that is in sort of Deadhorse Bay proper, but and you can kind of see the shadow of the spit on this image, and then at the bottom, sort of towards the bridge, there's a bunch of pilings from some of the industry that used to be there. So there was a tide mill, there were horse rendering facilities, there have been a couple things there over the years. So, and this is the big maps. On the sort of the road map view, you can see where the spit ought to be, and you can kind of see the shadow of it there. But when this whole area was capped, it sort of, at some point, the east side of it just kind of fell apart. So that's why you find all of this trash on that side of the bay, is just because the edge of it is eroding. Okay, and so these are some pictures of Deadhorse Bay at high tide. So you can kind of see the dots in the water. Those are the pilings from one of the old plants or mills. I'm not actually sure which one it is. But what's interesting, and Nick was there earlier this year when we went to go look around. This is what it looks like at low tide. There is a lot of some kind of oil kind of coming up out of the ground and liquefying all over the place. It smells pretty bad in the winter. Now that it's getting warmer, it's really, really awful. So it kind of looks like rocks, and if it's cold, it sort of almost feels like rocks, but what it is sort of black goo and you know, beach stuff. So I grabbed some samples the last time I was there to start looking into a little bit. All right, so yeah, so this one in the picture on the left, that looks like it could plausibly be water, but it is definitely not. That's all kind of some kind of oily goo. So all right, okay, so I'll just leave it with this picture of this bottle from Brooklyn. But all right, so this is actually that same goo that we need to analyze. But so I've been out there a couple times with kites. Haven't gotten anything great. It sort of seems to be a pretty low wind beach, so I got to work on getting there at other times of day where it's kind of easier to get stuff up. I'd like to kind of focus on the side of the beach where there's a lot of oil, and I'm planning on getting out most weekends this summer, so I will also be posting out to the list for people who want to come play around with garbage with me on the weekends, which is a fun thing to do. So yeah, so we're kind of at the beginning of this project, but hope to kind of get a bunch of good pictures this summer and see where we're at.
Cool. That sounds great.
Sounds like fun.
Thanks for bringing the oil.
Yeah. Yeah. I have it wrapped in a bag because this jar is not completely airtight. It's not a good smell.
All right, so let's see if I can get my screen share working here. I swear I figured it out. Oh, I did. Yes. Okay.
Whoa.
Don't look at that here.
There it is.
Okay, slideshow.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Can you see the slide? Can everybody see this slide? Great. All right, Scott, take it away on Barataria Bay.
Hey, so we heard and seen images of the Barataria Bay wetlands being oiled. I guess to speak, we got a little bit of funds to do 20 different sites to maybe compare some different things. And the kind of the sociology of the whole project is very different. I mean, from when we had an ongoing oil disaster with just gobs of media attention and lots of scientists. And I guess in 2014, we think about it a different way, and to bring new people into doing it who aren't, you know, in this kind of crisis mode. So we thought about just fitting it within, like, you know, going on a fishing trip. And in fact, this is a boat of a charter captain, Jody Dunwar, whose name is in red on the side of the boat, who we invited. And, you know, when we were out there mapping, he had a certain knowledge set from, you know, being from Plaquemines Parish and watching the marshes erode and working out as a recreational fisherman doing charter boat captaining. He had taken a lot of the NERDA, the bird scientists, out in some of the government surveys. And so, you know, part of this project is try to capture that kind of information as well. Another thing to learn was just to have lots of redundant equipment if you're trying to map 20 sites. You know, we would try to do 3 to 6 sites in a boat trip. And here we have me sitting on the boat trying to re-engineer a new camera rig because someone who had just started learning to fly a balloon actually lost the camera on the way down. This is a pretty good story of of just, you know, she was pulling the balloon in and kind of doing it a little roughly, and I noticed the rig was just flying around left and right, like really being whipped around. I was like, you might want to. As soon as I had said something, the camera popped off the line and went into the salt water. About a foot off of the front of the boat. So we had to, I guess a lesson I learned in doing this is just redundancy. If you want to map 5 sites in a day, have 3 sets of equipment for when you lose one. Another thing that was very different is just trying to start Map Nerd Club or the Cartography Collective, where people who have never been to Northern Barataria Bay were very active in doing the mapping. So in my research notes, I used them to capture a lot of the metadata, particularly about the tide. We've heard about how important the tide can be, whether it hides or reveals landforms. So I made sure to include that in the research notes that are attached to each individual map, and that's kind of an ongoing process. Part of meta, since we don't have the attention, we have a smaller group of dedicated individuals, and just documenting is important for communication among someone who wants to map but knows nothing about this project from the jump and has to learn it all remotely. So, I mean, part of a goal that I have, I work for an environmental advocacy group. I just want pretty pictures of wetlands to kind of evoke, some need to conserve them. And indeed, we got that. And here's a picture during the late afternoon. I found anybody who's a photo person knows the late afternoon light is amazingly gorgeous. The other thing that this image captures, besides just being pretty, is some different events. If you notice, there's these white, there's the mud flats, there's different species. There's also these white, this white in the water that's it's a result of the hydrogen sulfide metabolism pathway that occurs when the soils are going a bit anoxic. So there's just a lot of detail. There's qualitatively more things in these kind of pictures than your typical satellite imagery. This is an image from 2011, kind of the scope of one of the more awesome maps that I like to show. This is kind of the extent of a sub-bay of Barataria Bay, Bay Jimmy, from 2011. So again, this is after the oil was coming in, but while we still had response going on. And you can and this is a heavily oiled site where you can see there's some marsh platform that's totally been devegetated, and some platform in the rear that has been oiled and also devegetated, and some of the plants struggling to come back. So this is a site that we focused on a lot, and it is a challenge, y'all, to georectify these wetland pictures. I think we picked like the hardest thing we could possibly pick to map and to line up, to georectify. I think what I'm finding though is that these little bodies of water, I don't know if you can see that with the mouse, these things retain their shape pretty well. So you can often find a few of them and then use them as keystones, even if all of this light green area is gone in the 2014 photography, which just leaves you with a lot of water. But you can still match up these little interior bays and these little interior bayous that have pretty unique shapes. So that work proceeds. Here's a place, again, it was heavily oiled. This part that's all just mud is denuded. Here you have some of the PVC markers that mark a NERDA study site. That's the kind of detail you get with the photography sets. This was a place that was actually replanted. So it oiled and devegetated this strip. In 2011, we have the picture, and here's our boat with flying the balloon, right? And the marsh rakes raked the oil all off of it, and then the government came in and replanted this site. So this is a site that probably has, I think we can show that those planting efforts did something. There's a little bit more or a little bit less erosion from this site because of that replanting effort, and that can tell the story with very good pictures, about what we do when this happens again in Barataria Bay. Because if you don't know, Louisiana, we have tons of oil infrastructure and we have regular spills. Here's a 2014 project that was done using that same afternoon imagery. So this is one of the new ones from a site that wasn't heavily oiled, but still has a little bit of erosion. And if you go into MapKnitter, you can kind of click that overlay button and see just how much. And one of the things that when I show this picture, I use as a benchmark is that this bayou is beginning to break out into the bay, just to tell the story of what erosion is doing. Even on sites, this is BL1, so that L signifies, that in that SCAT data that Matt showed earlier with the green and the red, that it was very lightly oiled. So that's a different kind of story that we will be able to tell with the photography that's coming out of the Barataria project. Just the erosion story. And so this is my thank you slide for everyone that's been a part of the effort. And I don't know if people have questions, but.
All right, let's pull, if I can.
Scott, Justin asked a question in chat, and actually earlier Amy asked one of Bronwyn.
Great. Let's go to the questions tab here, Q&A. Oh, no, is it on the chat? Is that where this is? Sorry, can you clarify where those questions are, Jeff?
They should be in the chat.
Yeah, they're in the chat. So Amy asked Bronwyn, this is a while ago, have you checked out the tide calendar? And night tide and low tide, there was a max and min each year.
Yep.
That's
what I asked. Sorry.
And then
hello.
Scott asked, Justin asked, why is Barataria Bay so difficult to georectify? So I guess Amy first.
Yeah, we don't see those, but.
Yeah, I've been looking around at the tide charts, even just to sort of figure out when is sort of a good range of times to go. I'm also sort of, I don't know why I hadn't looked for it before, but I've been sort of poking around looking at the current charts also, because it definitely, those things, they all work together. So yeah, I'm excited about the new stuff for MapKnitter too, because I have a feeling I'm going to want to kind of throw a lot.
Great, and the question for Scott, we just found where you guys have been typing, which isn't on the Hangout, it's on the Google page. So that's why we paused. And the question for Scott was, why is it so hard to,
georectify?
Yeah.
Well, I was speaking in terms of wetlands in general. I think compared to built structures that stay put and have right angles, that right angle is really great for if you know someone, if you know something is at a 90-degree angle, it's really easy to then stitch the photo on top of it. Wetlands have none of that. There's no straight lines or anything, so it can sometimes be perplexing, like, oh, what is distorted and what is, just a very sinuous water feature. Stuart wrote a long time ago on how, and then if you have an eroding landmass that might be eroding differentially over time, when you're in MapKnitter, you're using the base map to place the photograph. It can be, again, a little perplexing. But I mentioned those little lakes, and Stuart Long, who's a cartographer with Public Lab, has written about how the intersection of a few bayous, 3 bayous, that point is stable. Even if a channel is eroding outward and getting bigger, the channel itself kind of stays in the same place. So, yeah.
Cool.
And I think that's like one of the things that we're trying to show with the Barataria project is just erosion in the marsh. And so to reference something that you think is actually not really there or moving, is complicated.
It's fun. I think it's not insurmountable. I mean, the tide was also mentioned. Some of the products, Stuart made a GIF a while ago of a particular feature, and it was a chronological series of GIFs of different photographs of that one land feature. But because there were different tides, it kind of looked like the land feature was growing and shrinking, when really over time it has been eroding. So it's important to kind of compare like with like in terms of tide, high tide with high tide and low tide with low tide.
Did other people have questions? We can see questions posted to us on the Google Hangout spot or right on this little web platform that we've been talking about. So,
I have one other question.
Sure.
For Nicholas, how are you connecting the stuff that you're seeing in the aerial imagery with, the actual Phragmites? So, are you able to identify by color alone where the Phragmites are?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. That's exactly what we're going to try and do the next time we go out there. And when I've been speaking with the Parks Department, they actually have someone who is an expert in plants, and they know exactly what is Phragmites. So our plan really is to go out, identify a patch of Phragmites, take aerial imagery, and see if we can then identify it from the air. It's a good question. It's something we still haven't been able to answer yet.
Well, I'm a wetlands specialist, so I'm trained to do this kind of stuff. And in Louisiana, we have a lot of that kind of thing. And there's the National Wetlands Research Center. They do a whole class in aerial photo interpretation. And one of the things you learn about plants and identifying plant species from aerial photos is that the infrared fall photography is often really good to use to differentiate between species, because different species have a different photosynthetic signature, and so the reds in that false color infrared shot will be more different than the greens. But also, if you take the image during a time like the fall, different plant species senesce at different times. So if you take it during the fall, some plants are still very active and will be very red, and other plants will have, they'll gone into dormancy and they'll show white. So often the fall infrared imagery is what the pros, people who look at wetland photography their whole lives, that's the data sets that they use.
Awesome, thanks for that. Yeah, that's really useful. Yeah.
I saw on here, Amy, you said you have lots of questions, but your audio isn't so good. Can you hear us enough to type a question or say something here? I'm not sure.
Hello. Well, if you kind of hear me, I don't know if it's going to mess up now like it did before, but I was having issues. So, can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I have so where I'm from and where I've grown up, there's lots of erosion issues, and my observation is that erosion isn't solely the landmass drifting into the water, but it's also, you've got to look at things like dredging. Is there any dredging going on nearby? And if that dredging's going on, then is it the fact that they're taking dredged material out from the seabed that is causing the erosion to go on onshore? So, because I was watching, and I can't remember whose presentation it was, but one of your presentations, the guy was 1 minute talking about some landfill that had been covered in, and then the next minute was talking about erosion. And so I was just kind of well, hang on a second, are the two really linked? Because actually erosion very often is more likely to be caused by dredging going on or through natural processes than from the fact that it's just been a capped landfill site. So I'm sorry, I don't know which one of you guys it was, but yeah, my question was that had you considered dredging as a possibility as a cause of erosion. So, yeah.
Was that you, Nicholas, or? I mean,
No.
you were. It wasn't erosion. Bronwyn? I mean, I'm
it's
sorry, I don't know who it was either. Oh, you're muted.
In mine. At Deadhorse Bay, you can kind of see by the beach where kind of the land is kind of cut down the side, and sort of landfill material is just kind of falling out all over the place. You know why it's eroding. You know, I don't know. You know, I haven't really kind of thought about dredging as sort of a cause for it, but it certainly, you know, it certainly is, which is sort of the reason for the most of that trash that's there.
Great. Amy, did you have another question or somebody else?
Yeah. Well,
yep, go for
the
it.
other question I had was that with concerns to the species of grass or whatever it was, there was some kind of invasive species. I could only catch bits of it though. I'm very sorry because like I said, I had technology issues. But the other question that I had was that my observation is that usually when landfill is capped, that there have been studies that prove that grass and other perennial species are good for removing toxins from the soil purely on that basis. And so my question was that are you sure that for the New York sky, I think it's the New York Park sky, sorry for not being able to know your name, I think it's Nicholas, was it?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so my question was whether the invasive species that you had in that park area was actually put there with a purpose, but I didn't quite catch the name of the species, so I wasn't quite sure if it was a perennial grass. But yeah, I just wanted to point out that yeah, is it something that's been planted purposefully to actually remove toxins, or?
Yeah, that it's called Phragmites, and it's absolutely not something native to the area. It's something that I actually don't know where it's come from, but it's yeah, it's a grass that has been invading, especially wetlands area on the East Coast. I wish I had more information than that. I don't. If you look at Phragmites, you can Google all kinds of stuff about it. It's great. But the fear there is, yeah, that's a good point about plants. You know, grass on the landfill is actually very useful because it does prevent erosion from landfill. They actually import all this dirt to cap the landfill, and they want to grow grass to kind of maintain that dirt and soil. But this one in particular is a potential threat to the cap of the landfill, since it is, you know, penetrating very, yeah. So.
Well, well, hang on, because I'm just yeah, are you sure 100% it's a threat? Because perennial grasses, there is a lot of research out there, you just have to look for it, but perennial grasses are purposefully planted on top of landfill sites these days because the perennial roots suck up all the toxins in the soil, and then what they usually do is they usually cut down all the grasses and then just burn it somewhere. But that's one way that's been shown to work for cleaning soil. So.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I don't know. I will say that I'm not an expert in the grasses. It's a little beyond my area. I know in working with the Parks Department, one of the solutions they proposed thus far to mitigate the Phragmites invasion was actually using goats and having goats eat just the Phragmites, which was actually very successful, but they're having trouble of selling that as a solution if Phragmites is a problem in that sense, of trying to organize a herd of goats, and having herds of goats in a New York public park isn't necessarily a solution that is being sold here. But it's I think it's a great question, and yeah, I'm anxious to kind of keep diving into this, to keep asking that question to find out for sure, because it very well could be that it's not a threat to the landfill at all, and might be doing exactly what you're saying of mitigating some of the toxins. though I'm expressing a concern that the Parks Department had and the Sanitation Department had of the Phragmites as well. So I'm going to forfeit the question to them and or a wetlands expert from the south.
And you know, there's a lot of study of this. The different wetland grasses do different things with different chemicals. So if it's something like mercury, mercury is something that's deposited from the air, from the atmosphere, from just coal burning power plants. So even if you know coal is burnt in China for fuel, the mercury goes into the air, it will come down in Louisiana and be deposited and sequestered by these plants. But there's, you know, depending on what kind of plant, if it's Phragmites, if it's Juncus, if it's Spartina, different plants will sequester different metals or different materials in different parts of the plant. And there's something, you know, a lot of people plant sunflowers in urban areas because the sunflowers will take up the metals into their plant tissues. But then the solution is usually not to burn the sunflowers, but it's actually to bag them in plastic and put them in the landfill. So I don't know. Sometimes the bioremediation, you know, you have to think about you have to think about the particular plant and know what the plant is doing with a particular toxin, and then you also have to think about the whole cycle of everything, because if those sunflowers were burned, it would just release the mercury back into the air. It would be pretty bad right at the site of burning, and then it would probably just go back into the wetlands.
Well,
so,
and I would say with the landfill in particular, in Fresh Kills, it's been a capped landfill. So, you know, in theory, there are no toxins that are escaping from the landfill. They're all entombed in the membrane that's happening. So I don't think that it's something that was placed there intentionally to mitigate any kind of toxin escape. They've actually dug trenches along the side. They have 12-foot concrete barriers along the landfill designed to kind of prevent any kind of leachate to escape. So I don't know that's necessarily it was a design that they put in there, but something to investigate.
With the spectrometer, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, it's been an hour, so if anybody has one last question or anything, otherwise we'll hold off and hopefully see everybody here again next week at same time, same place, different link. I'll post it. It'll be the right one on the Public Lab page. You can click it and get to the page from there. And next week is on infrared photography and infogram. I'm really excited about it and looking forward to seeing everybody there. Did anybody have a last question or anything? Good. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, everybody, and get involved and post what you're doing on publiclab.org. And hopefully see you next week.
Fantastic.
So, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Hey, Pat. Is Jeff awake? Are y'all sleeping? Jeff and Don? They're sleeping.
Oh, is it both of them?
They're frozen.
Is that Dawn?
Yeah, reportedly that is Don. It's hard to see. They're not
Alrighty.
listening.
Let's go.
All right, I'm gonna go to dinner.